Well, when I first got out of seminary in 1999, my first appointment as a pastor was as an associate pastor at a large church near Jackson, Mississippi. I was given the assignment of the youth ministry and the college ministry, but then there was also a line in my job description that said, and other duties as assigned by the senior pastor. You always have, yeah, exactly. Watch out for other duties as assigned. Ruth put that in my job description. I'm not sure what that means. Well, it turns out in this particular church, it was a challenging church on many levels, but one of my jobs was to do the weddings of everyone who wasn't a prominent member of the congregation, people who were just looking to rent the church or to be a part. Those came to me. And I thought, that's fine. I can handle a wedding. It's in the book of worship, and I can, lead that just fine. He said, but David, you also have to do their premarital counseling. And that gave me a little pause, because I was 25 years old. Up to that point, the longest relationship I had had in my life had lasted only 18 months, and that was while I had still been in high school. But yeah, sure, I'm the perfect one to do premarital counseling. Now, the second couple I did this for were actually getting remarried in their 40s, and I cannot describe the amused look on their face the first time we sat down. Going to talk about, how they're going to, anyway. But the first couple I thought I could handle because they actually were just getting out of college, 22, 23 years old, so I was technically older than them. And I knew I didn't know what I was doing. I was smart enough to know that I was dumb. So I went to everybody I knew, mentors, other pastors, some therapists, to say, how do you do good premarital counseling? And they gave me some amazing resources that got me up to speed. In fact, I still use some of those resources even today. They really are good. But as soon as I got them, I looked at the first chapter of the premarital book, and I was a little confused because the first chapter was on grief and loss. Grief and loss, pre-marriage. Grief and loss came first. Not only was I confused, but that first session, it gave me the talking points and what I was supposed to ask them. I was supposed to ask them, what are you having to give up? What are you having to let go of? What are you grieving as you think about being married? Talk about a downer to start with, and you should have seen the look on their face. They could not, I could say they were incredulous, probably is the right word. These two were in love. They were excited about being married. Even the guy was excited about the wedding itself. He had friends from childhood who were going to be his best man and his groomsmen, and it was a wonderful thing they had planned. And at one point I remember him saying, what do you mean? What am I losing? She's the best thing that ever happened to me. It is a dream come true. My wedding day will be my dream come true. And I thought, this isn't working out very well for me right now. I felt kind of like an idiot. So we moved on to the next chapter. There's got to be some easier topics than that. It just didn't make any sense. Until they were back in my office 6 months later, 3 months into their wedding. And they were telling me, Pastor, we got a problem. They were constantly fighting. Their honeymoon was over pretty quick, it turned out. And they were really struggling to figure out how to make this marriage work, young kids just getting started. It turns out that his buddies, who were his best friends from school, continued to be his best buddies, and they, after work, 3 days a week, went to the gym together, and on Fridays they did their traditional happy hour they had always done all the way through college and celebrating that. But she was working too, and she would be home preparing dinner and keeping the house in order. And he's like, why can't I hang out with my friends like I always have done? They're my best friends. My mom never complained about my dad going out. And then she looked at him and said, well, my mom never complained about my dad going out because he was home where he was supposed to be, helping me with dinner. So now I'm in a de-escalation situation. You've probably heard versions of this off and on. Well, I did a couple things. The first thing I said is, you need to go see a real therapist, one with a degree and a license and their own office and maybe their own security system, because this is slightly above my pay grade. If you think I'm not good at premarital counseling, you should see me at marriage counseling. But the other thing that occurred to me, even in my relative inexperience, was, and maybe you should go back and reread that first chapter again. Because this young this wonderful young couple. They were excited about a new beginning. Their marriage, their wedding, it was a new beginning for them. They were excited about it, but I don't think they took seriously enough, and I didn't fully understand that every new beginning has to start with an ending. They had not realized that the changes to come in being married required a transition within themselves where they let go of expectations and assumptions and old habits and patterns of living to make possible the joy that should have come with that new beginning. The guy needed to let go of some of the freedom he had when he was single. They both needed to let go of their parents' marriages because they were trying to live their parents' marriages and not their own. Well, new beginnings, transitions, that's what we're talking about over the next 3 weeks as we look at how this inner transformation, this inner transition happens within all of us whenever we face change, whatever those changes may be. New beginnings can be an inspiring idea, something that's so exciting with a fresh start. The new school year always has with it a bundle of excitement as we get new classes and new teachers and a new grade and new school sometimes. A new job can be a wonderful new beginning, new relationships that form, a newborn child, moving into retirement, not having to go to work and wear a tie anymore. There's lots of things that inspire us and bring joy. But new beginnings can also be a word of hope, because some of the changes that happen to us aren't ones we chose. Some of these changes involve a lot of grief and a lot of heartache, and they're scary and they're difficult, and we need to know that there's life on the other side. We need to know as we go through this change and as we do the work within ourselves that on the other side there is some new life and new beginning. And so we need both the inspiration and the hope that it brings, because the truth is changes happen around us and through us all the time, but we don't often handle them very well. In fact, we often try to skip right to the new beginning without doing that hard work inside of us that allows us to make that transition, to grow towards those new realities. Just like this young couple was ready for their wedding, but they weren't ready for their marriage. So our sermon series is about that inner transition that we all have to make in different ways. And we're going to have two different resources we use as we look at it. One is the book of Ruth. We read the beginning of that today. So we're going to have that and her story each week. We're going to allow it to unfold. But the other is a book, and I'll get the book in the bulletin next week so you can note the title and the author. But it's a book by a guy named William Bridges, and it's entitled Transitions, Making Sense of Life's Changes. So William Bridges, his book Transitions. It's required reading now for pastors who are transitioning to a new church. It's discovered to be that valuable. It was first published in 1980. There's a second edition from 2004, and it's in the self-help section, but it doesn't take very much, and it's a book about psychology, but you don't have to peel back many layers to realize they're really talking about a spiritual condition of the inner work that we must do as people of faith. Bridges writes at the beginning of his book, our society talks a lot about change, but it seldom deals with transitions. He says change is your move to a new city or your shift to a new job. It's the birth of a new baby, or it's the death of your father. It's the switch from an old health plan at work to a new one. It's the replacement of a manager with a new one. It's even the acquisition that your company just made. In other words, changes are situational. Our situations change all the time. It's often external. It's happening around us and to us. But he says transition, on the other hand, is psychological. Transition, I would add, is emotional, and it's mental, and it's spiritual. Transition is not those events, but rather how we reorient ourselves inside of ourselves, so that as we go through these changes, we grow, and we learn, and we develop, and we become more fully human and more fully the people God has called us to be. Even though changes happen all the time, if we're not taking the time to do the inner work, we'll never grow as people. And we'll find ourselves, and you may sometimes find yourself, even though the tune changes, the song kind of stays the same, you sort of have the same patterns and friendships and relationships, or the same troubling challenges with a boss or the same problems with your kids over and over. We just seem to be repeating ourselves, and that's often because changes are happening, but we are not. And so this is about the changes that need to happen within us. At the heart of Bridges' book is this model where he says transition always involves 3 phases. And we see these phases across time and across culture. We see it, in fact, in other cultures. Some indigenous cultures even have rituals that mark each of these moments of transition. They're universal, they're timeless. No matter how large or so small, or how small, all transitions begin with the ending. And then the next phase is what he calls the neutral zone, or a middle time. And then the last phase, finally, is that new beginning. So an ending, a neutral zone, and a new beginning. And each of our sermons in this 3-part series will pick up one of those periods. It's based on modern research and how we as adults develop. But as we'll see, it also has a very deep biblical and spiritual grounding. So regardless of where you find yourself in life, this 3-fold process of endings in the middle, the neutral ground, and the new beginnings happens over and over. A couple of ways he talks about it. One is if you think about remodeling your home. And you have this wonderful, beautiful sketch of what it will become, but before you can get to what it will become, you first have to do the demolition, right? You got to tear out, if you're doing your kitchen, the cabinets and the countertops, and sometimes some of the walls and the appliances and the plumbing, and it's a complete and utter mess. That's the ending. But you don't get a new kitchen or a new house the next day. It takes always, at least a month longer than they said it was going to take you, and several $1,000s more than they said it was going to take, and you're doing dishes in the bathtub and you're making stuff on the toaster oven. You have that in-between time where it's not the old, but it's not yet the new. You're in between. And then finally you get that new kitchen and can live into it in a new way. Or even think about planting a garden where you have to first clear the ground, and then you plant the seeds and wait, and then you wait for it to grow. That's the transition that we go through over and over. And so that's the framework, and that'll carry us through each week. So today we really want to look at endings. T.S. Eliot, and this is a quote that's in your bulletin there's a little picture under the 9 a.m. order of worship. There's always a space there, so I put a theme picture there. But that's where the quote is from T.S. Eliot. This is from the 4 Quartets. He writes, "What we call the beginning is often the end. And to make an end is to make a new beginning. The end is where we start from." Now, in movies and plays and other things where you get control of the story, sure, there is a beginning, a middle, and an end. But in real life, transition and change, the story is always in reverse. The end is where we start from, says Eliot. Endings are first, not last. And Bridges again says, considering that we have to deal with endings all of our lives, most of us handle them very poorly. And this is in part because we, again, take them either too seriously or not seriously enough. We take an end too seriously when we think an end is the end, when we think that there is a finality to it, that when some part of our life or a relationship or a job or our health begins to come to an end, we think that is the end of the story. We put too much in that and we don't have hope. That's taking endings too seriously. But in Bridges' experience, most of us don't take them seriously enough. We don't realize that they still have to happen. We still have to let go. We still have to say goodbye. We still sometimes have to let things die within us. But we don't take them seriously enough because deep down that scares us, and we try to avoid it. We don't want to think about the past. We only want to think about our present or our future. We just want to move on, not to cry over spilled milk or what's done is done, or let bygones be bygones. And he wonders at what point, how can we help people understand that very often the present that they're so focused on is just their past that they haven't yet let go of. He says endings must be dealt with if we're going to move on to whatever is next in our lives. New growth cannot take root until that ground has been cleared of the old habits and attitudes and outlooks. Now, he goes into depth in this book. You'd have to read the book to really plumb the depths of all of the ways these endings happen in our lives. He talks about disengagement and dismantling and disidentification and disenchantment and disorientation. All of these things that happen to us when there is this ending. You may be familiar with a grief cycle where when you're dealing with a hard ending, you have first that denial, and then you have anger, and then there's bargaining, and there's all of these other emotions that are wrapped up sometimes in these endings. We experience them to some degree or another. Even when the new beginning is happy, like that marriage, there is still things that are ending, and it is okay to grieve. All of these nuances, all of these varied experiences, it's because as we move to something new, some of the things that used to define us are no longer us anymore. And we have to let that be okay. I think back on my own life of the major new beginnings I had, and it's interesting that I have suffered through 3 significant bouts of depression in my life. My first year of college, my first year of seminary, and my first year out of seminary, between the ages of 18 and 25. Each time I moved from one place to another and radically changed my world and my environment. And as I read through Bridges' work, as I did my own kind of soul work on what was going on, this was a pattern. Every time I change, I hit this wall. I don't want that to happen anymore. What's going on? And I realized I wasn't dealing with the reality of letting go and of the real work within me that had to happen so that in this exciting new place that I find myself, I can allow it really to take root and be new. I was holding on. And I mourned the loss of who I was before, and now I'm in a new place and no one knows me and knows any of that history. I'm sure you could tell your own stories and own experiences of endings and how you dealt with it. Some of you in a healthy way, others probably have struggled and are still struggling. Well, that's why we look at the book of Ruth, because Ruth faced such a difficult ending. We heard in the story that because of a famine, Naomi and her family had moved from Bethlehem of Judah to Moab, just on the east side of the Dead Sea. But soon after, her husband died, and her 2 sons then married Moabite women, and after 10 years, her sons died, and so it was just Naomi and Orpah and Ruth. And we heard that back and forth as Naomi goes back home to Judah. Her daughters-in-law want to follow her. They have a tight bond. You can know there's such great love. They're weeping over their plight and their potential separation. Naomi finally convinces Orpah to go home, but Ruth will have none of it. And we heard those words, they so powerful in terms of faithfulness. Don't urge me to abandon you or to turn back from following after you. Wherever you go, I will go. Wherever you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people. Your God will be my God. Wherever you die, I will die. And there I will be buried. There are changes that happen in this first chapter, one after another after another. They changed where they were living, going to Moab. She had the change of losing her husband. Her sons changed by getting married, and then the death of her own sons. And now a return back home. Changes are happening, all of them. But we also begin to see some examples of the inner transition that is also happening in the story. First of all, there's no denial of the circumstances. I think Naomi's maturity helps a lot as she names for them the harsh reality of, I can't give you new husbands. You're better off at the home of your mother and of your own people. They know what they're facing, and they realize that their future is not guaranteed. And letting go of that is so difficult. Orpah does return home. We don't know the rest of her story. We hope that things worked out well for her. Naomi's making the same choice. She too is returning home to her own people, but it's Ruth who takes a different path. For Ruth, staying with Naomi is her new beginning. But in order for her to have that new beginning, look at all the things that Ruth has to let go of, has to let die who she is and where she came from. She had to let stay in the past. She had to let go of her home country and of her mother's household. She had to let go of her old religion. She had to let go of prospects of having a husband as far as she knew. She has to disengage from and dismantle her past life. She has to let go of everything that had previously provided her identity. It is disorienting, but she is determined. She took these changes seriously enough to know that everything would change. But she didn't take it so seriously that she was in despair. You can hear in her voice this note of resolve and of hopefulness, and I'm going to stay by you. Naomi's home will be hers. Her people will be hers. God will be hers. Ruth is saying that this is an ending for me, but it is not the end. It's just the beginning. And so divorces and deaths and job changes and moves and illnesses and even seemingly lesser events like starting school, all of these things can disengage us from the context in which we have known ourselves. And if we take the time to acknowledge that ending, to accept that ending, to lean into it even, to learn what it is that we do have to let go and what parts of us are passing away, when we have cleared that ground within us, we're ready to discover what God has in store for us. It was Jesus as he faced his own ending and his crucifixion. As he was meeting with his disciples, we hear in the middle of John chapter 12, verse 24, I assure you that unless a grain of wheat falls into the earth and dies, it can only be a single seed, but if it dies, it will bear much fruit. Endings come, always. We have to let go. We have to surrender, because until there is an ending, there can never be a new beginning. Indeed, it's in the endings themselves that God plants those seeds. And so that is where we leave Ruth's story and where we leave our story. Next week, we will pick up to discover where we find ourselves in the middle. But as we have ended ourselves at this point, we move into a final hymn, one that I hope will be a prayer for us as we sing it together. It's, I surrender all. I surrender all to Jesus. I surrender. It's an important prayer to make, both to Jesus, but also one that to properly transition, to properly learn how to make the right kinds of endings. We have to learn how to make this sometimes a daily prayer. It's not easy to surrender. It's not easy to let go. But as we sing this closing hymn together, may it be our fervent prayer to God as we commit ourselves to following him faithfully.